Dan. Hello, folks. Today we have a real special guest. He's our district attorney for the Suffolk County. His name is Dan Conley. Dan, thank you for taking the valuable time off and coming on here and visit us in Revere.
Happy to be here, Morris. Thanks for having me.
Right. Before we start, Dan, I want the people to know we met 12 years ago before you were even district attorney. And you sang Danny Boy for us, and I hope you come back to St. Patrick's and do it again.
I would absolutely love to do that. It's a little bit of a shtick that I have going back many years around St. Patrick's Day to sing a song. My father says that's probably why he named me Daniel, because he liked that song, yeah.
Right, and I got two favorite Irish songs, which I will tell you. One is The Wild Colonial Boy. I'm sure you heard that one.
Yeah, and I know the words to that, too.
Do you really? Yeah. There was a boy in Australia. No?
Yeah.
And the other one is The Rikes of Mallow.
Okay, good.
That's
yeah,
like
don't know the words to that.
An Irish jigger reel. Dan, I would like to ask you about your personal and professional background. Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Boston. I spent most of my life there until about 10 years ago when I moved to West Roxbury. I'm married. I have been married for 20 years. My wife's name is Tricia, and she is a nurse at New England Baptist Hospital and does a really nice job there working with people who are undergoing orthopedic surgery. I have two children. They're 18 and 16, a boy and a girl, and we all live together in West Roxbury. I went to schools in Boston mostly. I went to Catholic Memorial High School, which is in West Roxbury. When I was a young man, I went off to Stonehill College, which is in southeastern Massachusetts, and then returned home to go to Suffolk Law School in Boston. And got my law degree in 1983. Shortly after that, I joined the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office myself as a young assistant DA. I did that for about 9 years. And then in 1993, I was actually elected to local government in Boston. I was a member of the City Council. I represented all of Hyde Park and Roslindale and part of West Roxbury and Jamaica Plain on the City Council. And as you point out, in 2002, I ran for district attorney, which covers Suffolk County District Attorney, which covers all of Boston and the cities of Revere and Chelsea and the town of Winthrop. So I represent now, I was elected that November, and I represent about 700,000 people in this. If you look on a map, Morris, it looks pretty small, but we're densely packed in here, 750,000 people.
Dan, I got to tell you, it's a pleasure for me to have you at the DA.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thanks again. And I want to thank you for being a veteran of the community, because you do beautiful work for us. Well, and you got a tough job, you know. You mentioned to me before we went on the air, we were talking about, if I may say, the death penalty. Like, some people are for it, some are against it. Two things I was going to ask you is, if the federal government, like Eric Holder, who's the Attorney General, specifies that A gets the death penalty, but the crime was committed in Massachusetts where there is no death penalty. Is there a conflict between the two, if I may ask?
There's not a conflict if a defendant is charged under the federal law. So the federal law still permits the death penalty.
Supersedes the state law?
In this instance, it would. If you are charged with a federal crime, it doesn't matter that the state you committed it in has no death penalty. On the other hand, if you're accused of murder in state court, and we do this obviously as part of our job as district attorney, we do not have a death penalty here in Massachusetts, and the highest penalty for someone who commits murder in the first degree is life in prison without the possibility of parole. But there is no conflict provided that the defendant is accused of breaking a federal law, which Congress has said the maximum sentence is punished by death. I think you're probably thinking about the bombing situation.
Right, I was going to get to that,
okay.
If I can ask you about that. We have we have a great police crew in Revere. I mean, terrific police. And we have Chief Caffarelli, who's a Marine veteran, who was down at the bombing in Watertown, and another patrolman, Joe Intercola, who's Vice President of Mass Badge, which does a lot for the people, the citizens of Revere. They did a lot of action, but I understand you was there too, so we would like to hear what went on there.
Well, let me say I've had the great opportunity of working with Chief Caffarelli over these last year and a half, 2 years, whatever it's been, since he was appointed by Mayor Rizzo. And I'm very impressed thus far with his work ethic, his professionalism, the high degree of ethics that he brings to his work. So it's been a pleasure to work with him and the men and women of the Revere Police Department. So kudos to Mayor Rizzo and Chief Caffarelli and their team that they're doing a fine job here in Revere. Officer Inter Nicolo, am I saying that right?
Intercola. I hope I'm saying that right,
yeah.
Joe. Don't arrest me if I'm wrong,
Yeah,
please.
Joe, and I do apologize too. And I'm half Italian. My mother's name was DiNapoli, so I'm usually good with Italian last names. But I will say I met Joe too recently. You and I bumped into each other again at that Thanksgiving.
At the Beachmont VFW. Right?
Yeah, and he did such a great job organizing a Thanksgiving dinner, and how many? A couple hundred people maybe present?
More than that.
More than that. And,
right, standing room only crowd. We couldn't even sit them all.
Yeah, that's going to grow. That was the first annual. That's going to grow, and really thanks to him, because I think that really speaks volumes about any community when they reach out to seniors and people less fortunate themselves and offer a meal as nice as that was provided that particular day. So, yeah, as far as, and I know that that the chief and Officer Intercola, they were out in Watertown. I was there that night, but not participating actively as they were. They were part of a SWAT team, as I understand it.
Right, before you continue, Dan, I got a question that just hit me in the brainstorm here. Sanayef and his brother, before his brother got killed a police officer at MIT. Mm-hmm. I thought if you killed a police officer, that was a federal crime.
I don't believe that it is, Morris, specifically just killing a police officer, because he is going to be charged with that murder in state court. But that happened in Cambridge, and that's in Middlesex County. All the other charges for which he is accused are going to be handled in federal court. Now, the day of the marathon, I was invited to the finish line for a little party at one of the restaurants. So my wife and I were there, and we had fortunately left the area, literally, when I say this, 15 minutes or so before the bombs exploded.
Thank God, Dan.
And we were, and I do thank God myself, because I mentioned I had those two kids at the time. They were 17 and 15. No, they were off with friends in two different places, but they were 17 and 15 at the time. And I just, the second bomb exploded no more than about 20 yards from where I was standing, and then the first bomb was up around Exeter Street. We walked right up to Exeter Street and turned left, got in our car and drove away. But long before I had a chance to get home to West Roxbury, I was called back to the crime scene, and it was in fact a crime scene. As district attorney, all DAs in Massachusetts are charged with the awesome responsibility of investigating any unnatural deaths that occur in their county. So even though the police respond to these crime scenes, and we know the Boston police did and so forth, it is the district attorney who shoulders the burden, if you will, of investigating these cases. So I was there because 3 people were killed, as you know. But by about 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock at night, the United States government took over the case as an act of terrorism, and clearly it was that. And I was happy to turn the case reins over to them, because I will tell you they have all the resources that you can imagine to get the job done.
Right. One thing you and I really go for, I feel good about the cameras that were there, because it was the cameras that actually caught the Tsarnaev brothers.
Yeah.
I'm sure you feel the same thing about cameras?
Morris, I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're very perceptive on that issue. I know some people have complained to you and to me that it's too much Big Brother.
Right.
But I disagree with them. I'll tell you that if you go on Boylston Street where this event happened, this horrible event happened, every single one of those high-end storefronts and restaurants had their own high-tech surveillance system. And that's really precisely why they were captured so quickly. When I went down to the crime scene, it was very eerie. You saw blood everywhere. You saw the remnants of people's belongings. Lawn chairs, signs that said, like, "Go Morris, finish the race," things like that. Very eerie, but and of course I'm sorry to say that I don't mean to be melodramatic here, but the bodies of the deceased were there as well. Very sad, very sad.
Especially that 8-year-old.
Horrible. But what I immediately understood, and Commissioner Ed Davis also understood, is we looked around and we could see the cameras on the buildings. Problem was, none of these cameras were owned by the city of Boston. They were all owned by private entities.
Oh, they were not, okay.
So not a single camera was owned by Boston. So what had to happen was the detectives, literally, because everybody had fled the area and was forced to leave the area. So we had to contact the manager of Lord & Taylor, the manager of Abe & Louie's, the manager of Marathon Sports, the manager of the Forum Restaurant, on and on and on it went, to have them come in and to give the police access to those computer files, those cameras, and download all of the information from the camera. And then take that information, send it down to the FBI. The FBI aggregated it, right? And then they were able to, using their high-tech abilities, decipher, and I think, you and I were talking about this off camera. You had the Sarnaev brothers with their backpacks.
Right.
Captured on video, and then without their backpacks, they became prime suspects. But probably the key, I think the biggest break in the case in my mind, was when one of the two was on the cell phone. And so because the cameras are time-stamped, they can say exactly what time it was, then we knew that this call had been placed precisely at that time, or right around that time. And further identifying where he was standing at the time, they were able to get to the closest cell phone tower. And from that, there were 5 or 6 calls that were hitting off that tower at that moment in time, he being one of them. And they were able to really narrow in and focus. It was a pretty amazing bit of police work. But your point is well taken. It took a long time to get there, a long time, as far as I'm concerned, 3 or 4 days, because it wasn't our cameras. It was private entities' cameras.
That's pretty good. What I was going to ask you, you don't really, let's say, so the next one, if I was thinking like a terrorist, because you got to think one step ahead of them. So I could leave a package there. Now, I get telephone calls at home that says unavailable, unknown name, unknown name.
Yeah.
Suppose the unknown name had come through without checking it. Can they still trace back and find out what our call origin?
Yeah.
And from what phone? And from what phone it came from?
Well, they can tell, the technology is that good that if the cell phone, it doesn't matter that it might show up on your caller ID as unavailable,
right,
or unknown or whatever. They'll be able to get the number.
But they'll be able to trace the call because I got to pay for that call, correct?
Right.
So
well, they have to,
yeah,
pay for it, exactly.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. The next thing I want to talk to you about, if I can, and this came from a senior. She gets a lot of telephone calls, scam calls, what she calls them, and usually she hangs up on them. What information should they give strictly over the phone if someone they call they don't know? And I would like you to tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real problem. I mean, that's one of the great things about caller ID. If it's not your son or your daughter or your daughter-in-law, or if it's not a close friend or something like that, let it go. Let it go to answer machine, because the scammer generally wouldn't even leave you a message. But obviously, I think it's very good advice to tell seniors or anybody, right? Exactly. Don't give out information over the telephone. I mean, that's just a real mistake, especially things like bank account numbers, credit card numbers, Social Security numbers. These are really problematic, because before you know it, these very clever scam artists will be cleaning out your bank account.
Not only the telephone calls, but even internet cyber theft, I call it on there. Now, we did get a phone call that we won quite a bit of money. The only thing is we had to send a check for that thing was $200 or $300.
Yeah.
But they gave us a box number that was out of the country.
Yeah.
Somewhere in Nigeria, somewhere in Africa, wherever it was. And I told them, we do everything by mail, so just send us the information, and we'll be glad to send you the check. We never heard from them, and we knew we wouldn't.
Yeah, right. Well, that's good. You're very sharp, because, I have some experience with this on a personal level.
You too?
Well, I've been contacted many times by via the internet telling me that.
I don't have a computer.
Yeah, that I've been contacted many times over the internet telling me, like you said, I've come into multi-millions of dollars, but
mine was a few thousand.
Yeah, well, I get these messages from
That's why
foreign.
you're the DA.
Yeah. But actually, it was interesting when I first became district attorney. Probably within a matter of days, I got an email that was, "Congratulations on your new success." And I said, "Geez, wow, this is very nice. Who's this?" But it turned out it was just randomly sent to me They didn't know anything about the fact that I had just become district attorney, and they wanted to give me a lot of money, but I had to send them a $500 check or something to open up a new checking account or something. But listen, my father-in-law was in early phases of dementia and Alzheimer's, and he got himself involved in a lot of these scams. So he would get a solicitation by mail, foreign lottery, and he would send some money, and then they'd send him back a check for 12 cents and tell him that he came in second place, but if he played again, you know, he'd do better. So he sent another check, and this time he came in second place and got $1.12. And this poor thing went on until my mother-in-law figured it out and cleaned him out of about $6,000 or $7,000 before, you know. And this is before she knew that he was suffering from the early stages of Alzheimer's, and then, you know, fortunately it was only $5,000 or $6,000. That's a lot of money to them, a lot of money to me.
Those days, it's a lot of money to anybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Another thing is, this happened to me, but this is a good question I came up. Usually, people that try to pull scams on you will come up to your door, they'll knock on you, they'll tell you they're from, let's say, ex-witnesses or from this religion, that religion, which will make a donation, or they call you ahead of time and tell you to leave it in the mailbox. Have you?
Yeah, again, it's not something that I do. I've been solicited by, religious organizations at the door. I've been solicited by environmental groups at the door. I think we all have to have our antenna up. I know that some of these groups are, in fact, legitimate. But we have to be very, very cautious about what kind of information that we give to people. I think a really piece of good advice is that I would give folks is slow everything down. I think you did the good point. When you said to the person, listen, I do everything by U.S. mail. Send me an explanation.
Right.
Send me the forms. I'll review them. And then, generally speaking, the scam artist is going to move on to somebody else. You know, and of course, my grandfather, who's long since passed on, told me when I was a very young boy, if the proposal sounds too good to be true, it is.
Usually, Judge Judy always says that.
Is that right?
Yeah, she says that.
It's good. It's a good bit of advice. Yeah.
Exactly. The other thing I was going to ask you, Mr. Conley, is if I call you and try to scam you over the phone, let's say, that's one thing. If I try to scam you by mail, is the penalty the same over the phone as it is? Because mail is mail fraud.
Right. You know, with the mails,
right.
you would
that's federal, right?
Federal.
Okay.
You'd be more likely be available for federal prosecution. But what we have found is people who have been successfully scammed, usually when we start tracing things back, we end up, as you point out, in Africa or in Eastern Europe,
right.
or in Asia, and it's really
even in Russia.
Yeah, even in Russia, and it's very, very almost impossible. It's like chasing a needle in a haystack, and it's almost impossible to find. So, you know, there are, unfortunately, most people are honest people in this world, I find, but there are a subset, an element that we have to be very, very cautious of who want to separate us from our hard-earned money.
Right. Another question that came up I'd like to ask you, Mr. Conley, is this happened to me with one person. A gentleman came up one time and he said, I'd like to inspect the gas meter or something. Before they put them outside, they used to be down the basement. I happened to mention to him, I looked at him, he showed me an ID. That didn't mean a thing to me because I didn't see the gas truck.
Yeah.
So I said to him, where's your truck? He said, I left it around the corner. I says, well, then go get it and bring it over here because that way I could have got his license plate number as well as the company on the truck.
Yeah.
He says, I'm going to go get the truck. But I never saw the gentleman again.
Yeah.
So that was one thing.
That was a smart move as well. I think, you know, when people come to the door and, you know, we know that the gas company and the Edison sometimes do come to the door. Today, a lot of it's done by technology.
Right.
But, you know, you have to be very careful even of that. You know, usually, in my own personal experience, if the Edison is coming, they'll call in advance, you know, and say, listen, we're coming. Now, that doesn't mean it couldn't be a scam as well, but I think that, you know, the last time the Edison or the gas company, I can't remember, it's been a few years in my own house, the call came in and it had the name displayed on my, phone, caller ID. I was there, I waited, the truck was out front, the uniform was on, the ID was here, I felt pretty good. He was down my basement and out in a matter of, 2 seconds or whatever. Not exaggerate, maybe a minute or two to check on the meter. So, I mean, he turned out very legitimate. We didn't lose him. But you have to be very careful. People are going to come in, especially they go after the elderly, and especially when there's more than one. And you pointed this out. Two people. One is to distract. The other is to steal.
Right. If I see two people on my door, I'm home alone, they never get into the house. I just don't answer the door. I don't tell them, I'm sorry, you got to come back later. I just don't bother answering the door.
Right. Yeah.
Another scam that and this one I happened to see on TV, which I thought was, I mean, whoever was doing the scamming was very, very good. People go in like to cash a check in the bank, and a lot of people, I learned from watching TV that I never hold the check so you can see the name, the number of the check there. This gentleman that they caught, he had like a thing on his, like he was cashing a check or like he had a cell phone. It was really a camera that he had pointed at your check, and then he would click it. You didn't know that.
Yeah.
And he had all the information that he needed just by that check, and he was able to clean your account out.
Yeah. You know, again, this technology is a wonderful thing.
If it's used correctly.
If it's used correctly. But there are people that are going to use this technology to their advantage. So, you know, again, that might be a good thing. You're very smart. You fill out your deposit slip, maybe turn the check over, and then pass it to the teller that way.
So what I do now, the way I learned it from watching, which was good, is I have an envelope. I have the check, it's in the envelope. I give the envelope to the teller or the cashier, tell them the check is in there. They take it out, and that's the only cameras I see that is the ones that are up there, not the ones that are behind me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So we talk. Oh, this is something I would like to mention too. I think it's Colorado, this state, which I'm not too crazy about lately, but I love the people of Colorado. Some of their counties decided to take the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem away and some of the prayers out of their schools. Now, they claimed that because there's different faiths, like, let's say, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, doing one was degrading, like, let's say, the other two. So someone suggested that they have silent prayers, and that would harm nobody. You could have 2 minutes and pray any way you wish. I was going to ask you, do they have a legal right to take the prayers and the national anthem out of the schools?
Well, it's been a question that's been debated over and over again, you know, for many, many decades. I think there's a small minority of folks that want to take prayer and they want to take the Pledge of Allegiance and Star Spangled Banner and the like out of schools. You know, myself, obviously, I feel like you a very, you know, strong affection for our country.
I love my country.
Yeah, and absolutely. And, you know, you think of what the sacrifice that you made as a World War II veteran. I know I mentioned to you a while back about my father was a Korean War veteran. My uncles were World War II vets. So, I mean, I'm very proud of them, proud of you and all the accomplishments that you have. It's a very minor issue, as far as I'm concerned, you know, that we all should respect. The right of people to make the Pledge of Allegiance and to sing the Star Spangled Banner in schools and other places.
Right. You know, I've always felt, I know I'm going to get criticized for this, but I always try to be honest when I speak to people on the show. I feel the people that came to this country to become American citizens came here to assimilate with us. I don't mean to drop their culture. I mean to adopt our culture. They can have their own language, their own culture, but while they're here, they came here to adopt ours. Some of them think that they came here for us to adopt theirs, and I've had that happen. People talk to me about that. How do you feel about that, if I may ask you?
Well, yeah, I mentioned a few minutes ago that with Officer Anticolo's name, that I'm Italian by heritage, at least half. But my grandparents came from Avellino in central Italy, the Naples region, and then my grandmother came from Sicily. Both came here without the ability to speak the English language, but both of them were very proud American citizens ultimately. So I think you're right. I mean, and we love our Italian culture, and we have so many things about our Italian heritage that we hang on to and cling to with great affection. But you know, they wanted to speak English. They wanted to become American citizens. They wanted to vote, all that sort of thing. And yeah, we all have to have some. There has to be some unifying core principles.
There is, you know. Probably before your time, because I don't know how old you are, but I think I'm a little older than you. They wanted to adopt a language called Esperanto, Esperanto, which was to make a common language that the whole world can speak, one language, so you can communicate with people in China and Russia, but that never came to fruition. So I would have liked to see one language, but you know, when I look at TV, at one time when I was growing up, French was a popular language, Italian was the language. Now it's English.
Yeah. So I think in Europe, it's amazing how many Europeans and people from around the world speak English. I mean, I'm not a worldwide traveler, but I've been to Israel. I've been to
Can I ask
Turkey,
you what part?
Haifa,
Yeah, but
in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv. I visited with the JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council, to get a better understanding of life in Israel. I've been to Turkey to speak with judges and prosecutors there at the request of the Turkish government. It's pretty amazing. You go to Israel, you go to Turkey, they speak English to you. We have no idea, how to speak their languages.
when I went to Israel, we went to Jerusalem. We went to Haifa. What they have the Baha Temple, I believe that was there. The beautiful
Yeah,
with
yeah.
all the
Bahia, I think it is.
yeah. Okay, but the Bahia Temple
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
with the sea coast there, beautiful there.
Gorgeous, yeah.
And then we went to Jerusalem, and I noticed they have these sections, no problem. I mean, they still got these little like sections where they have like Hebrews living, Christians living,
Sure.
Muslims living.
Yeah.
And it's funny that people get along there very, very, very well. I mean, there's little minor problems, but
Yeah.
most of the time, that's one of the few countries in the Middle East where they get along. Now, I know a lot of people are not going to like this, what I say, but like in Africa, I hear like in some places, they burn Christian churches, they kill Christian priests. Why? Why, I ask myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not familiar with the...
No, but I mean, this is what I hear on the TV, the
Oh, yeah.
BBC,
Yeah.
Al Jazeera, which is a great radio station, by the way, that comes in, gives the news out. Very good. So I just wanted to
Yeah,
mention.
I mean, people, my observation is that unfortunately people are dividers. They're a subset of people that are dividers, not unifiers, and that's oftentimes the root of all conflict.
I'm glad you're Christian. I'll tell you why. If you had been Jewish, you would have had 636 laws. You only have the 10 Commandments.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
By the way, you have a new, this I forgot to mention. You got a new program for veterans. Let me just read this, Dan. We are going to start a veterans course session to help troubled veterans get their lives back on track with counseling. I never heard of that.
Yeah, well, it's something actually that's not quite fully into fruition at this point, Morris, but it's in the planning stages. So we have 3 kinds of specialty courts, let's call them, in Suffolk County. One is a drug court for people who are committing petty crimes, petty theft, stealing from their family, things of this nature. We put them into drug court to get them hopefully rehabilitation and off drugs rather than put them in jail to have them come back out and do the same thing. So that's drug court. We have a mental health court. We deal with people with mental illnesses as opposed to, again, putting them in jail. We get them the kind of medication they need, the kind of interventions they need, so that meets. And we also have a homeless court. Sometimes people commit offenses because they're homeless. They steal or they trespass or they do certain things that they shouldn't do because they're homeless. So we have those 3 kinds of courts. This is going to be a 4th specialty court that we're in the process of. And on my way here, as a matter of fact, a good conversation with the city of Boston, anyways, a corporation council. And I'd like to do the same for Revere and Chelsea and Winthrop as well. And that's, how do we find these veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder? A lot of them are Iraq, Afghanistan veterans. Some of them have turned to alcohol. Some of them have turned to drugs. Some of them have, are doing petty crimes. They're homeless and the like. But they have a special set of problems as veterans, and we hope to have a specialty court set up for them sometime next year to kind of give them the kind of, they sacrificed a lot. You sacrificed a lot, my father, my family. So, most people come home pretty good, relatively whole, but there's going to be a group of people that, war is hell, and it really has tormented them, and then they're off the rails, and we've got to figure out a way to try to help them get back on.
Thank you for what you do, Dan, really.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Morris.
I'd like to talk about it, maybe one other thing over here, and this is about something, I know very little about it, but you even know more about it, and I happen to live in the city where it happened. That tells you how much I read the papers. Talk about some recent cases in Revere, but there's one in particular that involving a woman that was murdered on Ocean Avenue.
Yeah, that was a very tragic case, and fortunately, Revere is a very safe city. And,
it is.
It's again, Chief Caffarelli and his team, nice job, keeping things relatively calm here. We live in a modern society, so sometimes aberrations occur, and this was just one of those aberrations. In this particular case, a very young woman by the name of Stephanie Moulton was working. She was working in a health place for people struggling with mental illness. And one of the patients at this facility kidnapped her, essentially sexually assaulted and murdered her. And then he brought her body up to Lynn and left it behind. And it was just a terrible case. He was suffering. His name was Deshaun Chappell, and he had some mental illness. But people who have mental illness, there's many, many people in this country that have mental illness and cope with it day to day and abide by the law. If you understand what you're doing, and if you understand that it's wrong, then the law still punishes you. And that's what happened to Deshaun Chappell. We very clearly proved that
Did he get the full extent of punishment of the law?
He was convicted very recently in the last month or two of murder in the first degree.
And he didn't get the insanity plea, I hope.
He did not. He did say that he was insane
Right.
at the time. It's up to the jury to decide that question. It's responsibility of my office, the trial prosecutor, to prove that he was not. We have to actually prove that he was not insane. And we were able to do that through his medical records, through his psychiatric records, through his physician who examined him, and so forth. He took many, many steps that we were able to prove that showed he knew exactly what he's doing. And he also knew, or as we say in the law, he appreciated the criminality or the wrongfulness of his conduct. So he was convicted, and thankfully he's serving life, and he won't hurt anybody else.
Dan, excuse me, that almost reminds me of that murder of that 14-year-old that killed a teacher in Danvers, I believe it was. Similar to that there, and he dragged the body out behind a school or somewhere out there.
Yeah, very, very sad case. Just absolutely breaks your heart.
And they're trying him for first-degree murder, I believe.
Yes, they are. Yeah, I don't know too much about the case. The case is being prosecuted by my colleague, John Blodgett, who abuts us here. He begins in Lynn, and I end in Revere.
Right.
So John and I have a lot to talk about. But generally, we don't go into deep specifics about the cases that we're handling. We just think that's the best. But when you see, like you've seen, the pictures of the young teacher, Colleen is her first name. Having trouble with remembering her last name.
She was only 26.
Yeah, beautiful young woman, vibrant, attractive, engaging. Just an awful shame. And this is where DA's offices, step in. When the police, work closely with us, ultimately solve a case, and we working together. We're leading the investigation, but it's our job to hold offenders accountable, serve victims, serve their families. And this is where we step in, where most people, want nothing to do with. This is what the work of the prosecutor is, to serve victims. We did it well, I believe, in the case of the homicide of Stephanie Moulton. We do it in lesser cases that you've never heard of here in Revere and elsewhere, and we'll continue to do it.
Good, Dan. Before we close, I was going to ask you one other thing. I want to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Can I do that?
All right. Go ahead. Let me see.
I'm a senior at the Senior Center. Like I said when we started the show, I met you 12 years ago. We would like to have you come back there. Can I go back to my administrator and tell him that you would like to come back?
Absolutely. I would like to come back. And let's try to do it maybe around St. Patrick's Day, as you said, so we can belly up. We can belly out some.
I can bring the Irish music in.
Please do.
So to the people in the city of Revere, we're going to try and get our district attorney back around St. Patrick's time. And all you who've never met him, you couldn't meet a better gentleman. We'd love to have you come down. And Dan, we'd love to have you come to our Senior Center. And this is on TV, so you can't back out.
All right, I'll do it. Happy to do it.
Let me say thank you for coming. May
God
bless you, Dan.
Thank you very much.
God bless you for what you do, really.
Thank you.
You do a fantastic job, and I hope you go. Well, I don't want to say a district attorney for a long time. I want to see you go up a little higher there. But thank you for coming.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Morris.
And I want to say thanks for the people of Revere for listening. God bless our troops and definitely our great country, the United States of America. Until the next time, thank you, people. Thank you for listening.